Hi, I'm Father Joel, and thank you for tuning in to Pilgrim Priest. I'm grateful to all of our mission partners and supporters, especially Bill, who at the end of November celebrated 2 years as a patron. Learn more at patreon.com/pilgrimpriest. Thank you, Bill, and thank you all for listening and supporting us. God bless you. Peace and joy. It seems to me that peace and joy go hand in hand. Let's meditate a little bit on where we find peace, because I think it's a prerequisite or a condition for joy. And I think the lack of joy in the world around us is a symptom of the lack of peace. So when Saint Benedict lived in the 5th, 6th century, he was in Rome for a while, and he kind of decided that Western society was a complete shipwreck, and he escaped into the wilderness and lived in a cave. I'm not sure if any of you have ever felt like running away from life, but he didn't just run away from life, though. He was seeking a deeper connection with God, because he had found peace in God, and he wanted that to be deeper. Eventually, other folks joined him, and they founded the very first Western monastery. Well, not the first monastery, but the first monasteries that became successful. He wrote a rule that his monks followed, and it became known as the Benedictine order. And his community actually established libraries and learning and schools, and would eventually reinvigorate Western society. They would when things had calmed down in the late Middle Ages, in the 1100, they would then start the university system, which was founded in these monasteries, which had been founded in Benedict's being rooted in his relationship with God. A key architectural feature of monasteries was the cloister, and the cloister is really just a courtyard. It was a feature found also in Roman homes, but it's a courtyard walled in on all 4 sides with an ambulatory, a place you can walk. It has pillars and a little roof. But then the center is open. The center is open to the sky. Usually there'd be a well or a cistern in the middle, and it was used to collect water that they could use. But there's a theological significance to this cloister. It is closed to the busyness of the world and open to heaven. And I think this is a key piece of how we're meant to live our lives in the world. That we need to keep part of ourselves closed to the outside world and open to heaven. This part of a monastery was not open for visitors. You had to be a monk. You had to be part of a member of the monastery in order to join it. But the monasteries did have guest houses. They welcomed guests. And in fact, they were supposed to treat every guest as Christ. So you had this kind of 2-part thing, this sort of deep rootedness in God, this spiritual place that is protected from the outside world, but then a place in the monastery that's open to the outside world, that welcomes outsiders and that shares the peace of the monastery with them. And I think this is an important feature for how we need to be living our lives in the world today. We need to be open to heaven. We need to be open to God's love. We need to keep that part of our life walled off from the chaos of the world. But we also need to be hospitable. We need to welcome everyone. We need to share our peace with them. Over the monastery doors, Benedict put "Pax," peace. Later on, St. Francis would come along, and he would wish people "Pax et bonum," peace and the good. It's a great philosophical concept of the good, but it doesn't translate well into English. And so I struggled and finally settled on peace and joy. If you get an email from me, it'll probably be signed "Peace and Joy." If I had a coat of arms, that would be the motto underneath, would be "Pax et Gaudium," peace and joy. Today is Rejoicing Sunday. We're invited to rejoice. And it seems to me that joy flows from peace. That peace comes when we are rooted in God. And joy comes when that relationship then begins to overflow into the relationships around us. That we find joy in our connections with others, But we can't connect with others if we're not at peace, if we don't have a sense of security that comes from something bigger than what the world can offer us. Peace and joy are things we can't really manufacture for ourselves. Bishop Barrett, in his homily for this weekend, gives two examples of finding peace, and I think they're both good. The first one is an example of the ocean, when it's all kind of rolling and full of chaos. This is kind of like our lives, right? Sometimes the ocean can be calm, sometimes it can be really full of waves and stormy, and that's not within the ocean's control. In a similar way, sometimes our lives can be peaceful, we can have peace around us, and sometimes they can have all of this chaos going on. But if you move beneath the waves in the ocean, just a few feet down under the water, you'll find calm. That chaos from above doesn't get down underneath. And we are meant to move from the surface of our own hearts down to the core, to the center, where we find God. The outside can be stirred up with all kinds of stuff. It just takes one phone call, one comment from someone else, one unexpected twist or disaster in our daily life, and there's immediately a storm brewing, right? But we don't have to live on the surface of our hearts. We can move down within where we find that peace. Another example Bishop Barron gives is the wheel of success and failure. I guess the Middle Ages liked to talk about life as this wheel that went around. And if you picture a wheel like moving along, sometimes you're on the top, sometimes you're on the bottom. Sometimes you're on the top, sometimes you're on the bottom. And they thought of this as like success, life is going well, oh, it's crummy, failure. Oh, we're doing better, life is going well, oh, it's crummy, failure. Like the success and failure, and I think a lot of us experience that kind of wheel, that our life kind of goes around. And the invitation in the Middle Ages, they started to put a Cairo, a symbol of Jesus, in the center. And the idea was that if you move to the center of the wheel, you stop experiencing the around and around, the ups and downs of this life, and you start to be able to actually move in steadiness. And both of these are the sense that I'm talking about, that if we can move from the outside to the inside, if we can move from the surface to the heart, there we find that the Lord is loving us and He desires to give us peace. It's from discovering the Lord's presence in our life and being in communion with Him that we then experience joy. And I would argue that joy also happens in our connections with others, when those connections are deeply rooted, when we're with people that we don't have to worry about what they're going to say, what are they going to think of me, but with those sorts of people that themselves are peaceful, and we can have those steady connections with them, that we can often experience joy in those relationships. The invitation for us to realize is that the Lord is with us. And I love this image comes to my mind. I was imagining a castle that's besieged. The enemies are outside and the people on the inside are in turmoil. They're worried, they're fearful. What's going to happen? What do we do? How long can we hold out? Some people want to surrender now and give up, and maybe things will go better. And as they're having this heated discussion, there's perhaps a shadowy figure, someone in a cloak and a hood standing in the shadows. And no one seems to notice this person until he steps forward and takes off his cloak. And it is the king himself. The king himself is there with his people. He is there to rescue them. And he tells you, I can lead you to victory. And he has led the people to many victories before. That moment of realizing the King is with us, we don't have to figure this out, we don't have to do it ourselves, would give peace and joy. In a similar way, our scripture readings want to tell us that the Lord that we're waiting for, the Lord that we need to save us, is actually closer than we think. In fact, He is already among us. How would your struggles, how would your discussions, how would the chaos in your life look different if you knew that Jesus was standing there waiting to step in, standing there waiting to offer guidance, to lead us out of the chaos and into something safe, to win the victory in this moment? How would your life look different if you let Jesus get even, if you let Jesus fix the problems? That's exactly what John the Baptist is telling us. Hey, Jesus is coming, and he's going to sort it all out. So you do what you can to be on the right side now. Stop hoarding your possessions. Stop trying to find security in what you own. Stop abusing others. Stop using your power to give you a sense of security. Rather, let go of those advantages. Allow yourself to be humble. And in doing so, trust in the Lord. Because he's going to show up with his winnowing fan in his hand, and he's going to clear the chaff will be burned up. The worthless people and those who are of value, the grain, will be stored in his barn. And so we realize that it is Jesus who will ultimately judge, and we don't have to fix the problems of this world. However, we're responsible for ourselves, and we need to work on that now. Having a place in our lives that's open to heaven and closed to the world can help us realize God's presence, can help us connect with God's presence, can help us experience that peace and that joy. Our second reading is taken from Philippians 4, and I want to walk through that reading a little bit because I think in one very concise way, St. Paul is illustrating what I'm talking about. So this is Philippians chapter 4, if you wanted to read this for yourself, but he says, "Therefore, my brothers, whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, in this way stand firm in the Lord, beloved." Standing firm in the Lord, that describes that being in that deeper place in our heart where we're in communion with God, where we can find that peace from the chaos of everyday life. Stand firm in the Lord. Then he goes on to say, "I urge Euodia and I urge Syntyche to come to a mutual understanding in the Lord. Yes, and I ask you also, my true yokemate, to help them, for they have struggled at my side in promoting the gospel, along with Clement and my other co-workers, whose names are in the book of life." What a beautiful little passage. There's a controversy between two people who used to get along well. They don't agree. And St. Paul is urging a third person to help the two of them come to a mutual understanding. St. Paul has this peace even though there's this chaos going on, but what a beautiful reminder, right? That just because we follow Jesus does not mean we're all going to see eye to eye or that things are going to be perfect. Then he goes on to say, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I shall say it again, rejoice. Your kindness should be known to all. The Lord is near. Have no anxiety at all, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God. Then the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." Paul wouldn't tell the people to have no anxiety if they weren't at sometimes experiencing anxiety, right? So if we experience anxiety, it doesn't mean we're in the wrong place, but rather Paul's invitation is to bring those things that we're worried about to Jesus. Make your request known to God. You don't have to face it alone. And so bringing it to Jesus allows us to then move into that deeper place of peace in our hearts. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Paul knows that we can reflect on what is bad or what is good. And if we keep talking about what is bad, if we keep thinking about it in our hearts, that'll steal our peace. So Paul wants us to focus on the things that are good. Keep on doing what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, then the God of peace will be with you. Paul's given them an example, and he wants them to follow this example. Paul's given them an example of living in peace in the midst of turmoil. Paul's given them an example of a life of joy, even when it isn't easy. And he's inviting them to do the same. Let's follow Paul's example. Let's move from the outside of our hearts to the middle. Let's experience a little more peace and joy in the midst of the chaos of the Christmas season. In the off-season, Santa has started raising cattle, which I guess makes him a jolly rancher.